When it comes to innovation and creativity, nothing stands more in our own way than our own selves. Before we attempt to deepen our experience with DT, it's important to step back and look at the well-researched topic of human error and the many ways it interferes with our behaviors and choices. This will allow us to truly appreciate and leverage the ways in which a deepened DT experience can help us overcome such biases. Cybernetics scholars Rolf Glanville once advised, "Accept that error is endemic. There is always error. The question is not to eradicate error, but how do we manage error? How do we live with error?" Digging deeper into the challenges of managing error takes us straight to the work of psychologists who have studied decision-making for many decades. They have identified upwards of 180 different kinds of biases that affect our ability to make good decisions. We want to call out 10 specific ones that cause especially serious problems for innovators, both during discovery at the front end and in testing at the back end. There are 3 categories of biases. In Category 1 biases, the source of error lies deep within us. These include a projection bias, which is a self-forecasting error where we overestimate the extent to which the future will resemble the present. The projection of our past and our present interferes with our ability to imagine new ideas for the future and inhibits us from accurately assessing the likelihood of their success. Next, there is a hot-cold gap. Our emotional state, whether highly emotional or hot, or unemotional and cold, can influence the way we assess the potential value of an idea, making us either under or overvalue them. This bias keeps us from being able to predict how others, or even ourselves, will react in the future when our emotional states are different. Then we have an egocentric empathy gap, which causes us to overestimate the similarity between what we value and what others value. This bias makes us assume others share our thoughts and preferences, resulting in the creation of new ideas we love that don't actually meet the needs and desires of those for whom we are designing. Rounding out Category 1, we face selective perception. Otherwise known as functional fixedness, this bias makes us overestimate the effect of one factor at the expense of others, paying an overabundance of attention to specific parts or stimuli while ignoring others. This results in a more narrow set of ideas and possibilities. All of these relate to our inability to escape our own worldview, including our past, our current emotional state, our personal preferences, and our tendency to be fixated and overly influenced by specific factors. DT helps us overcome these biases in 2 ways. DT pushes us to collect deeper data. By immersing ourselves as vividly as possible in someone else's experience, we reduce reliance on ourselves and our own knowledge. We also see different perspectives through DT, but using diverse teams, we expose ourselves to the ways others think, which helps us surface our own hidden biases. For Category 2 biases, the source of error now lies in those we are designing for. We'll start with the say-do gap. We often try to minimize our own biases by asking people the problems they face and what they want. The problem, however, is that people are often unable to describe their current state and often can't fully articulate or even realize their deeper needs and wants. This results in a say-do gap between what they say now and what they will actually do later, which could make or break the effectiveness of what you design. Then we have the response bias. The say-do gap is made worse in some situations by people's tendency to tell us what they think we want to hear, either so our feelings don't get hurt, or by saying things that make them look good or that are socially acceptable, like telling our dentist that, of course, we floss twice a day. This is particularly damaging because it often results in false positives. We invest in ideas that we hear will be promising, but then much to our surprise, they ultimately fail. So to recap, we try to get accurate information from those we are designing for by asking them what they need and want, but they are either unable to accurately describe their own needs and wants, like the say-do gap, or they often think and say what we want to hear. Again, DT can help us decipher the truth, and here's how. It gets us to ask open-ended questions. Ethnographic conversations uncover hidden needs unlocked through probing and focusing on experiences and journeys. We focus on behaviors, not intentions. DT teaches us to value observation and focus our questions on actions, not attitudes and opinions, which releases people from feeling potentially judged. And we leverage immersive tools. Storyboards and journey maps make new ideas tangible, so feedback by users can be based on actual experiences, lessening the likelihood of bias. In our last class of biases, Category 3, the sources of error relate to how we handle the information we collect. First, we have the planning fallacy. When we do create new ideas, our excitement towards them causes us to see an overly rosy future, characterized by overly optimistic predictions about how well they will be received. Because of this, we rarely plan for failures. Then we have the hypothesis confirmation bias. This is perhaps the most commonly discussed bias. Simply put, we look for facts that support our favored solutions, and we often don't believe data that disconfirms them. Interestingly, even when this bias is revealed, people often fail to correct it. Next up, we have the endowment effect, where we are so deeply attached to our current solution, the pain of having to pivot or give it up outweighs the pleasure of getting a new and improved one that better meets the needs for those for whom we are designing. And last, we have the availability bias. This causes us to undervalue the ideas that are harder for us to imagine. We like ideas we can root into, where we have a basis of understanding. Since a familiar idea is likely not a completely novel idea, this leads to a preference for more incremental, safe solutions. So Category 3 biases demonstrate that most of us are poor scientists. We tend to be overly optimistic, skeptical of disconfirming data, wedded to initial solutions, and we play it safe versus being truly imaginative. DT helps us get past these Category 3 biases in a couple of ways. It guides us to treat everything as a hypothesis to be tested. We actively seek disconfirming data to try to surface our assumptions during prototyping. We also explore many options. By testing multiple higher-order solutions built through co-creation, DT helps us let go of our babies if they don't work, because we have alternatives to fall back on. Just as we mentioned at the beginning of this segment, there will always be human error. Luckily, deepening your experience with DT will help keep biases from being barriers to innovation.